for him. So all he did, they give him one of the IT staff members access to log in the test server. Is that a problem? Yeah? Yes. And we ran into a problem immediately, actually, when we were doing the reporting. Why? Because when they were taking this case to court, yes, we know your account was used, but it's very clear it was not you, right? But again, it's your account that was used. So from where I sit, as a digital forensics incident response respondent, there's no way I'm going to say it's you. I can only document and give the evidence of the account that was used to do this fraud, right? So, but internally, you guys know, as a bank, they knew that pretty much who did this was the vendor. But the vendor was not using a unique ID, but one of the staff members' username and password. So, and that's what goes to the report, which brings in a lot of other challenges when it comes to litigation and supporting your evidence. Okay? So you might end up actually incriminating the wrong person. Okay. I hope I'm not late. So I'll go to another one. Insider threat. I promise this will be the last for the banks. Insider threats or insider threat attackers. This was also a bank. You will excuse me for talking so much about the banks. I'll come to you, Telco. So this was actually a guy who had stayed in the bank for over 8 years. He was actually the main DBA, the database administrator. He had unrestricted access to the database. Basically, he was the database guy in charge of everything. So, of course, over time, the bank got to trust him, and that was okay. So what he did, he installed a team viewer, which allowed him to connect from home and have the application run on the background. But he did not do this on the machine itself, on his laptop. So he did install a virtual machine. I'm sure you guys know virtualization. You can use a tool like VirtualBox, VMware, so on and so forth. So in this case, he had used VirtualBox, installed a Linux virtual machine, and inside that virtual machine, that's what he installed Toad for Oracle. They installed for SQL, Toad for Oracle. For the non-technical guys, this is a tool that you can basically install and help you manage a database server, right? For the DBAs, I'm sure you know this. So from this system, he could actually have unrestricted access. Remember, he's the DBA. So he has the username and password. He's an insider. He had access to the core banking system of this specific bank. But remember, ideally, in most banks, and I believe for everybody else, for you to do transactions, to make changes, for example, if you walk into their bank tomorrow, and I want to change my particulars, for example, I change my phone number, right? The guy at the front end will just use an interface, go to my account, change the phone number, and it will reflect in the back end. Such an action can actually be logged very well if the application is well developed. But in this case, the guy basically is dealing with the core banking system. There's no other application between him and the core banking system. He goes to the back end, logs into the database itself, and he can manipulate the variables on the database. So all he did was very simple. They were able to identify a dormant account. This is an account that had some substantial amount of money. I think it was a customer savings account. And he had not been using it for some time. So during this period, the bank had started a program to enroll all their customers to mobile banking. And such an account was not enrolled because it's just a savings account, stays there, and the user or the customer was not very keen on enrolling. So all they did, this guy went to the back end and changed the particulars. A very simple attack. You go, change the name. Of course, the bank account remains. Change the name, change the face, right? And the signature. The only three things he changed. The face, which is the photo, the signature, and of course the name. And this change was not reflected anywhere in the logs. It could only be stored on the database logs, but no application could log such because he has not gone through the main door. He has actually gone directly to the database. And all he did was to send another person, once the particulars were there, they go to a different branch and pause as the owners of the account and say, I want to withdraw money. So they tried with some small amount, around, I think, a few $100. It worked, right? They were like, okay, so it's working. Then they continued doing this over time, and eventually the bank lost around 6,000 US dollars. Simple attack from an insider and very hard to detect, because even if you had a tool to detect maybe such kind of, to detect frauds, this one will not be picked because nothing out of ordinary has happened. And that's how the guys managed to defraud the bank. So what are the challenges and lessons we learned, right? So insider threats. Most organizations, banks, telco, government, they tend to protect the perimeter, protect against someone who is outside there, an attacker who sits somewhere outside Malawi. But they're forgetting also the guy who works within the bank. He can either maybe be used by criminals, maybe in collaboration, or he can even do it alone if he has the right skills. So most organizations tend to forget that insider threats are also threats. Access control, very key. In the previous, in the case I've just talked about, in this case, the DBA had unlimited access. There was no maker checker. Basically, he could do something on a database, and there was nobody to sort of authorize or verify. So that's an access, and of course, he could have installed maybe a DAM, database access monitoring tool, that basically records all the database instructions that have been made. And of course, that should have been picked by a monitoring tool if it was monitoring the DAM logs. Okay. So I'll switch to something else. This one does not necessarily affect the banks only, affects everybody. And actually is the most common, the most efficient, and the easiest to do. Even the attackers in this case, they don't need to have a lot of technical skills, as you're going to see. So it's phishing or domain spoofing attacks. So this was actually affecting oil and gas company. So basically they were shipping oil in the East African region, and they would distribute to a few other countries. So it was a big business institution. So they were involved in importing oil from Kuwait, to be very specific. So what did the attackers do here? It was a very simple attack. They just got access through a phishing email and managed to access the sellers' systems. And once they got inside there, they monitored their email communication with interest or keen interest to see which specific employee deals with money, who is sending and receiving POs, who is doing the payments. That's all they needed. So all they did, they went to his email address and set a rule that redirects all the emails to them. Of course, when you go to your Outlook application, even right now you can see there's a way you can actually set a rule to redirect emails to someone else. You can decide to either keep a copy or redirect entirely. So in this case, they did that, and they were able to see the emails and the communication with the finance department. So they stayed and waited until they found a PO. So the buyer sends a purchase order, and they see, for example, that now it's going to involve money. So once they see that, they'll clone an email address with misspelled domain, and now cut you off from that communication, and they take over. So in this case, all they did, they waited until they got the invoice from the buyer, and once they got that, they created a fake. They did a fake, basically they changed the bank details, and now started communicating directly with the buyer. They just told him, look, we have changed our banking details, please use these ones. And that's, just like that, they lost money. This was even the biggest amount of all the examples I've given. And is the one that used the least technical knowledge. So what are the challenges and lessons we learned in this case? Very simple one, email security measures. Something simple as two-factor authentication. How many people have 2FA on their emails? Wow. Please be serious. I expect everyone to raise his hands. 2FA is very important, two-factor authentication. Even on your personal email, very important. So, of course, domain verification using DMARC and things like that. And, of course, transaction verification process. Do you have internal processes to verify payments? So these are some of the things that we learned. But 2FA, please, if for sure you don't have that, make sure you do. Very important, very critical. And just to deviate, we have really gone to do, I mentioned we do VAPT and red team assessments. We compromise an organization to an extent that we're able to do pretty much everything. But the only thing that stops us from going the extra mile is the 2FA, right? I have your email address, I have your password, maybe during a red team assessment, but with all those details, I can still not log into your email. Why? Because it gives me a pop-up. Maybe click this or send the, feed in this code. So it's very important, very important. Okay. So lastly, let me go to something else. This was a very recent one. It was a telecommunication institution, a very big telco, to be very specific. They experienced what we call a denial of service or distributed denial of service attack. Now, this was very interesting, and I'll tell you why. This was in January 2023. So it's a leading telco that suffered a massive denial of service attack, affecting services for 3 consecutive days. So they have been struggling, or they had been struggling for 3 consecutive days. Customers were calling, and they were very furious that, what's happening with this telco? We are going to disconnect. We are not happy with your services. We have not been able to work, send emails for the last 3 days. And it used to come and go, come and go. Maybe after 3 hours, the service disappears again. So the company was really struggling to recover from this issue. So they called us in, and we were supposed to find out exactly and investigate what exactly is happening and try to restore the services that were being affected. So their customers could not do anything. So what was the issue? When we responded, we realized that it was a simple but critical ONU. ONU basically, for the guys in telco, optical network unit. I'm sure you guys are using that currently. If you have fiber, you are giving fiber to your customers at home. So it's that device that they terminate at your home. So it's the optical network unit. So they had public-facing IPs. So these devices that they're given to their customers had public-facing IPs. But they had port 22.3.3.3 open, right? So we checked and realized that these ports were open. And they allowed telnet access with no authentication. This one they didn't know. So basically, they get the devices from the supplier, they take to their customers' homes, they install, configure, and customers have internet. But they had never checked that there were some ports that were open. And you can see that's not the standard port 23, right? For telnet. Telnet is port 23, but this one is 2.3.3. Of course, like a way of trying to hide it there. So all was done, the attacker basically logged into all these ONUs automatically using a script, which I'm going to show you. And all you need to do was to download malware on these devices. Remember now, we're talking IoT. This is not a computer, it's just a simple network device. He was able to download malware inside that device, and using BusyBox, which is a powerful Linux-based command line tool, like your shell prompt, he was able now to command and create a botnet with over 50,000 devices. So, and you use these devices, give them commands, and they would attack other people globally. And while they are doing this, or while the attacker was doing this, you would block all the services. So basically the customers could not do anything, could not go to the internet, could not browse, could not even connect their own laptops, because the device has been kept busy by the attacker's commands. So it uses their computing power to pretty much attack other victims. So I've tried my best to hide a lot of information there, but pretty much this is just a screenshot from what we found. So you would go, for those guys who are good at Linux, basically it's changing directory for like cd/tmp. That semicolon there means the first command. He'll go ahead and remove that file, basically the malware, if it exists. Then he'll go ahead and download from his own IP address another clean malware, change the execution mode to be 777, basically means make the file executable, and just fire it. As simple as that. So you'd go ahead, download the tool, and you can see the last word there is snowslide. So basically, the snowslide would be him calling all the botnets now to start attacking his victims, and he would issue commands remotely. And that's how he managed to cripple the telco. So, what are the challenges here? You realize that this is no longer your digital forensics. The one you did with server, sorry. You realize that this was not your normal or ordinary dealing with a happening here. It's not your ordinary computers. So if you are prepared, remember we talked about you being prepared in case of incidents. It's very unlikely that you also have a plan for such kind of an attack, because in this case it was dealing with network devices or IoT. So our challenge was first and foremost trying to understand what is actually going on, because here there are not logs to work with, right? We didn't even have logs. In fact, if you look here, after he's done with that, you'd go ahead and delete this script. And remember, these devices don't log a lot. So there's pretty much nothing we could do. So what we did was to take one of the device, right? Set it up within our lab as if we are one of a new customer, right? Then plug in a cable from there to a network switch and plug our monitoring laptop on that switch and started now monitoring with a tool called maybe Wireshark, TCP dump to see all the network traffic. Then wait until this guy attacks. So remember, when he attacks, our device will be among the victims, right? So while he was attacking our device, we're actually capturing the logs and seeing exactly what is happening. Then after he's done with his attack, we'll go back to our logs and see the network traffic of what was happening. That's why we ended up finding all this information, the tools, the scripts, and everything. And of course, we managed to get also his tools and the tools that he was using. So we also managed to get another discovery, which was weird, because on further analysis, we realized that also these specific devices had a backdoor installed there by probably the manufacturer, because the tools, the device actually got second-hand from somewhere. And that brought another angle of potential supply chain hack, which could, of course, be utilized later for data harvesting or even further compromise. And the most important here was you need to adopt as an institution. Do you have a digital forensic incident response plan? And we realize that it's not always a straight path. Sometimes the attack might not be what you're expecting, and you need to be ready for anything. And in this case, it was a different approach as opposed to normal computer digital forensics. So the thing is, you need to approach it with an open mind and adapt to the unknown. Okay, so just to highlight on this, how could you enhance this, for example, as a country or as a sector? For example, the banking sector, you need to probably have your own sectorial certs, which can actually help you respond to such. And we saw this when we were responding to all these incidents over the last 10 years. We realized that some of the challenges we were getting was also not having the right skills. I mean, some of the organizations here were lucky enough to have people like us on dial, but some institutions don't have the right workforce. So imagine if you had a CERT, which has all these specialist incident responders. These are people you can easily call, and because they are doing this on a daily basis, they'll have all the skills to quickly respond and coordinate. And this will actually go very far in reducing the downtime. So whereby we are recovering in 4-3 days, probably if you have very good experts ready to respond, then probably a day or two. Okay, so of course, we need a national CERT to help in the coordination and facilitate incident response recovery. And of course, threat intelligence. I believe in threat intelligence sharing. I believe there's going to be a talk either today or tomorrow on the same. So what we have realized is that you go to, especially the banks, you realize they used the same vendor to get the same application. Of course, they just changed the interface and the logo, but the same vulnerability still exists. So in such a case, if you find such, if you share with your colleagues in the same industry, then they can better prepare for such incidents because the attackers are pretty much the same. So you need to share threat intelligence with the guys on the same industry, and that will actually make the whole thing easy. So of course, we have why the sectorial certs are very important. They have industry-specific expert to handle tailored threats. So you guys, maybe you have experienced a lot of threats in the banking industry. You can have a sectorial cert that deals with such incidents. So you know the banker's problem, you know to solve them, and you can, of course, make sure you respond in time. So, in conclusion, what are the things that we share with our clients, and what have we learned over time? So whatever you do, please don't fall for spray and pray attacks. What kind of attacks are these? Spray and pray. These are okay. So the other thing we learned is that cyber threats are not always complex. This is very true, as you have seen. Sometimes we work so hard, or institutions work so hard to make sure they buy very expensive tools, protect the perimeter, but sometimes the cyber threats are not even that complex. It's just a simple internal user clicking a link or a malicious link can actually end up compromising the whole institution. Well, you have invested a very big firewall, very expensive monitoring tools, but you have not trained your users. So cyber threats are not always complex, and that's one thing we have come to sort of conclude. Limited access, of course, this is very critical. Not everybody needs everything. So if you have a DBA, make sure they don't have access to everything. They just have access to what they need. And of course, train the employees. These are your first line of defense. People tend to invest so much on the tools, solutions, products, but they forget about the people who are running who are in charge of the organization on daily basis. So train them on security, very important. And of course, monitor and respond. You can't really protect what you don't see or don't have a visibility. I believe, or I assume, everybody here, they have a SIM at least. They have a visibility. If someone logs in over the weekend on a critical system in your organization, you can pretty much get an alert, even if you're at home. You need to have that. You need to have a visibility of who is doing what, who is downloading what, who is deleting what, which user was created and why. You need to have at least that visibility. Backup. This one, there are no two ways about it. And to be very specific, today, if you fall a victim of ransomware attack, this is the only thing that can help you. So the first thing is, make sure you don't become a victim. So do your best to make sure you don't fall victim to ransomware attacks. But if it happens that you fall victim to a ransomware attack, I can tell you for sure the only thing that is going to save you is a backup. Decryption nowadays, before we could try to get some leaked keys, things like that, and try to decrypt a little bit. Today, very unlikely that you'll succeed with getting a decryption key. Not unless you want to pay. Are you guys willing to pay? I don't believe so. So plan for incidents. It's not if, but when. This is also not negotiable. You need to have an incident response plan. You need to know. You need to anticipate the attack. Even if it has not happened to you yet, you need really to anticipate it because it's just a matter of time and it's going to happen. So don't come up or don't start coming up with a plan after you've been attacked because it's too late. You need to have a plan. Assume it's going to come. Then finally, I'll talk about layered defense strategy. Is the strategy that seems to have been working quite okay. So think of security holistically, like not just protecting the parameter, forgetting the users, protecting the endpoint, forgetting about the training, firewalls, things like that. You need to have a layered security, protect every possible path of attack, and you'll be more secure. So that's it from me. I'll open up for a few questions regarding the incidents. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to take one or two from the audience. Thank you.
how organizations, based on those different contexts, what they should do, both from a governmental point of view for national teams and also teams in the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So he's asking about two things here. The cyber insurance. I believe there's someone who's going to talk more about this between today and tomorrow. And I don't, okay, the incident that we have handled in terms of cyber insurance, I've never come across one where the insurance company was willing to pay, right? Unfortunately. So that's based on the experience. Now, regarding whether to pay or not, now that's a management decision. Now that's where now the risk analysis comes in. You have to weigh in as the management of the organization. What is at stake? And I think you have given a very good example of a casino that said, look, what is the worst? Let's try to pay and we get back to business tomorrow. And this other guy who said, look, I'm not feeling like paying. And I'm sure it's not a good decision to make. One thing, and actually, it's not an easy decision. One thing I can tell you that, please, whatever you do, don't find yourself a victim of ransomware attack. These decisions, actually, you make them under a lot of pressure, right? Imagine a bank that is not operating for the last 5 days. What do you tell your customers? What do you tell the management? I mean, let's say you are the IT director. We have been giving you budgets for the last few years, and we have been buying whatever you're asking. How do you tell us that we cannot operate for the next 5 days? So these are very hard questions, right? So to be honest, from where I sit, I would say the best thing is don't find yourself in such a situation where you have to make such a decision. So start with the basics. Start preparing right now. Take security serious. Give it the seriousness it deserves. Because those decisions, trust me, you make them under extremely high pressure. That's my contribution. Yes, please.
Okay, you have talked about two-factor authentication. My question relates to Active Directory, which is prone to hash-based attacks. Okay, let's say, for example, somebody has gained an initial access to your environment. Okay, whether you have two-factor authentication or not, they'll be able to do lateral movement So in that case, how do you protect yourself?
Okay, a very interesting question. Let me try to break it down for guys who might not be very technical. So he's saying two-factor authentication is very important, and it works for some applications. But he's saying for some, especially and very specific, the Active Directory, it doesn't work effectively. Why? Because you might actually have the two-factor authentication, but if I happen to get access to your Active Directory credentials, even if you have two-factor authentication, I still be able to go ahead and use those credentials and do lateral movement. Lateral movement basically is saying I'm able to open through specific servers, right? So he's asking, what is the solution for such a case? So I would say we talked about defense in depth here. To be honest, it's not possible to close all the doors, right? You just have to mitigate, and you cannot be 100% secure. I know of that flaw in AD, that even if you have two-factor authentication implemented, I mean, we do red team assessment. So I know it's possible to find my way around some systems, but you are saying, do your best. You may not have 100% security, but do your best to raise the level here. So because it doesn't work for AD, please implement it for whatever it works. If you just email, and that raises your bar. Yes, I know it doesn't work technically for AD because you can still do something. Yes, please.
Okay, maybe I start. Just to say thank you for the presentation. It's quite enlightening, and particularly with the case studies, it just puts things into perspective that indeed these things are real and they happen. With that in mind, there was a mention of how we can manage external vendors or suppliers, service providers. You have indicated that there's need for oversight. I thought you'd just need to expound more on what kind of oversight that would be, because even if you're sitting next to them, they can still do a lot in your presence. So I just wanted you to expound more on what kind of oversight is one expected to do in that instance. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of oversight, and to be very specific on the case we talked about here, an ideal solution would be, okay, once the vendor comes in, they don't have access to your network immediately. Let them have a test server, right? Once they have a test server, let them develop the tool there, test it there. Once it's working, remember secure software development cycle. What does it say? You develop the software. During deployment, before you go live, you need now to call someone. That's where people like us coming. Audit the software, do source code review, and check that it's clean enough. Until they give you a clean build of your report, then you can go ahead and deploy to live. So those are some of the things that in such a case they would have done. Whereby, yes, the developer can come, sit with you, there's a test environment, he can do all the integrations there, but once he's done with that, you do software, source code review, check the software that is good enough with a third party or someone else, and once you get a report that this software is clean enough, then you can push to your production. Sorry, they also added to add something regarding your question there on the AD. There's also something else you can do, maybe very technical, but what you can do is, of course, make sure your passwords are so strong such that once I get your AD ashes, I have to do a lot of work for me to decrypt them. Then there's something you can do where you can basically disable login with ashes. You know, you can log in without a password, right? With just the username and the hash. So you can disable remote logins with ashes. Yeah? Hope we are not, we don't take more time? Okay, thank you, thank you. So we are out of time though. But you can see, sorry, you can basically see me after this. I'll be here the whole of this week. We can discuss more on this. And of course you can see my colleague there, Tiwonge, she's sitting back there. Maybe raise your hands, yes, you can talk to her. We are here to discuss this and we can help you out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel Nguli, for that very eloquent presentation. We have, judging by the number of questions, A very interesting one indeed. So please, like he said, he will be around for any further questions you may have and other interaction. On that note, our next presentation is coming from Mr. Andrew Pemba, who will be talking about navigating cybersecurity in financial services, the role specifically of the CSIRT in responding to cybersecurity threats. I would like to ask you, Mr. Pemba, to, if you can, make your presentation in 30 minutes. So we also give a chance for at least 3 to 4 questions from our audience where time allows, which it actually doesn't at the moment. So Mr. Andrew Pemba, ladies and gentlemen, may we give him a round of applause as he comes to the stage with his presentation that, judging by what he seems to be preparing, I'm sure he's going to do it in under 30 minutes, in fact. Very capable gentleman, Mr. Pemba is. So, technical team? Okay, so we'll go to our next presentation first from Mr. Andy Chadwick, who will be covering shadow server operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andy Chadwick with the second presentation for today.
It's okay? Okay. Okay, hi everybody. Just waiting for the slides to come through. There we go. So yeah, good morning to everybody. Really good presentation so far, and great to see you all here. Thanks very much to Christopher and Co for letting me talk a little bit about Shadow Server. So Shadow Server, what is it? So I'll say one thing: we're not a commercial company. I'm not here to sell anything. I'm here to give you free stuff, free cyber threat intelligence. Before we start, I think many of you will be familiar with the Traffic Light Protocol, TLP. So this presentation will be at TLP Amber plus Strict. So that means you can share this on a need-to-know basis within your organization only, unless otherwise specified. So please bear that in mind. So Shadow Server Foundation, what is it? We're a not-for-profit foundation. So we don't charge for the cyber threat intelligence that we provide. It's registered in the US and in the Netherlands as a not-for-profit. And really we work to make the internet more secure for everyone. Anybody who owns a network can benefit from Shadow Server data. We have unique sources and a real pan-global vantage point. So we have a network and sensors across the whole globe. And we share information with internet vendors at no cost to mitigate vulnerabilities, detect malicious activities, and counter any emerging threats. We partner with national CSIRTs, so Computer Security Incident Response Teams, like we are here at MW CERT. We work with law enforcement, network owners, so any network owner, if you've got a static IP address, you can benefit and sign up to reports from Shadow Server. And we work with industry and security researchers worldwide. So we have an unparalleled mix of trusted position and information, and we've been going for 20 years. And you know, this proven community partnerships enables Shadow Server to perform a critical role in internet security. And we are the world's largest provider of free cyber threat intelligence. So if you're from an institution, a bank, from a government agency or a SME, this is free. You need to take this. You need to sign up for this data and use it to protect your, your networks, your data devices. Please do drop me an email and sign up. I'll share that later. So some of the numbers, we do around about 4 billion IP version 4 addresses are scanned on a daily basis. And also now IP version 6. We do that 77 times a day, and we have about 400 million hosts respond to that on a daily basis at IP version 6. We have around about 4 to 5 million, I think it's even higher now, IP addresses that are sync-hold per day. And that covers around about 400 different malware families and variants. Across the globe, we have a network, 2,750, I think it's approaching 3,000 now, of Class C networks that host honeypots and spam bots. So, you know, this is honeypots, for those of you who are not familiar with the term. It's where you put a network up that looks interesting, that will entice malicious actors, cyber criminals and others to come and try and exploit that network. And by doing that, we get visibility of their, you know, techniques, what they're using, what software, how they operate, their command and control infrastructure. We collect unique malware samples, and we have over 1 million ingested and analyzed every day on our sandboxes. And we have around about 2 billion samples in our malware repository. And, you know, in terms of large, you know, big data, we have 12 petabytes of malware and threat intel stored, and that's growing about 1 petabyte per year. We also have around about 70 billion SSL certificates, which are indexed and searchable in our data and analysis clusters. And, you know, the partners that we work with, we have 8,000 network owners and 201 national CSerts in over 175 countries and territories who rely on our free daily reports. And we also work behind the scenes for dozens of international law enforcement operations. So this shows a map. The green countries are ones that have signed up to Shadow Server in terms of national CSERT, and this is growing every year. You can see, looking particularly at Africa, and I should mention that my role is the director for Africa for Shadow Server. So I'm very interested in, you know, what progress we're making in Africa. So there's a lot of gray areas there. I see one big one there, which is Zimbabwe, and I was talking to our colleagues yesterday, so very keen, you know, once the cert gets established in Zimbabwe, we'd love to share that data with you. But we can also see in West Africa and Central Africa, there are still some gaps there. And my role is also funded by the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, as is Lawrence's role at first. So I was formerly with FCDO, prior to that National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK. So I was the lead for the whole Africa Cyber Programme in Africa for 5 years until I retired from that last year. So now I'm leading on this work we're doing with Shadow Server, with the national certs and others, but we're very closely linked to the work of FIRST, you know, the work that Lawrence is doing in Africa. And yet this law enforcement work, we have a Shadow Server special projects team that works behind the scenes with law enforcement agencies to, you know, assist operational law enforcement, and, you know, that ultimately can lead to arrests of cyber criminals and others. So a little quick look at Africa. As mentioned, that's the green areas. We're trying to focus on the gray to turn them green. And we have about, I think, 56% of African autonomous systems who are not yet signed up. With reports, we have 44%. So that's the balance. Still a lot of work to do across Africa. And we can see, you know, the main countries there, Egypt, Morocco, and so on, where we still have work to do to get them signed up. And a quick look at the sinkholes. Again, another target country for is Algeria. There's 65,000 IPs there which sit in Algeria. We've not been able to formally engage yet with the Algerian CSERT. So as we can see, there's work to do, mainly there in Nigeria and North Africa. And a quick look at Malawi. So Malawi, all of the data for the country at geo level goes to the national cert. So that's all taken care of. And Christopher's team share that with, you know, telcos and other institutions within the country. But we'd be keen to see some of these individual companies like Telecom, Airtel and so on sign up separately if they have the capability to ingest their own data. So please do get in touch if you're representing one of those institutions and you'd like to subscribe to the cyber threat daily reports. So we have basically 5 outputs. Number 1 is the internet scanning I mentioned. Number 2 is the malware analysis and the botnet sinkholing. So that's basically grounding those malicious IPs and stopping them working in terms of command and control infrastructure. Output 3 is the global honeypot sensor network, which has, you know, we have around about 3,000 nodes across the globe. Output 4 is the technical operation, so that's the background work that goes on to keep this network and the whole system up and running. And then we have output 5, project management and communications. My output for Africa is output 6A, so that's a new output, and this was recently funded by FCDO for, you know, a three-year period, and I started with working with Shadow Server back in December. We're doing some work around cyber resilient for NGOs, and this is a collective approach, working with various other institutions there, such as the Cyber Peace Institute, and this is part of the UK's GESI activities to try and help these NGOs. I'll just skip through this. I know I'm keeping you from the next presentation and then lunch. But yeah, we're working with Cyber Peace Institute, and we, you know, helping not-for-profits because, you know, they don't typically have a great amount of funding, and I think sometimes cybersecurity and threat intelligence comes bottom of their list. They've got other priorities in their main core activities. So that's, you know, what we're doing with the NGOs, and also we're doing a similar program in Asia with the Asia Justice Coalition. So how do you register for the reports? You know, if you're sat there thinking, my organization could really tap into this and use this threat intelligence, please visit shadowserver.org. Very simple address, shadowserver.org. My email address is andy@shadowserver.org. And if you go to that webpage, this is what you'll see. And if you look in the top right-hand corner there, it says subscribe to reports. It's really as simple as clicking that button, and you'll get a web form where you fill in all your details. You'll have to prove that you own the network that you're asking for threat intelligence on. So, you know, have the details ready. You know, that you're registered to, you know, as the owner of that network. And any issues, you can email me directly at andy.shadowserver.org. So that's all from me. I'm going to keep it short and sweet, really. But the takeaway from this is please use us. Please sign up to the free cyber threat intelligence. It's being funded by FCDO and other donors, such as Craig Newmark and other governments. But this role in Africa is predominantly, or totally actually, funded by FCDO. And my job is to get you guys to sign up and use it. So please drop me an email, go to shadowserver.org, and you know, I'd love it if some of you signed up to this, especially at national cert level. It'll make a tremendous difference to your cybersecurity resilience. That's all from me. Any questions from anybody? I'd be happy to take some questions. So to be the owner of a network, it has to be a static IP address. So most of us as home users, we're probably on dynamic addressing. So you'll sign up to a telco, and your IP address will change probably on a weekly basis if you check. If you actually own the network, so a range, an IP range, you will be registered as the owner of that domain and that IP range. And if you have the documentation to prove that, then we can share the cyber threat intelligence just for that, that range. The exception is at national level, a national CSIRT, they get the whole country, the whole data for the country. So, you know, in terms of geo, they will get everything for that country in its entirety. Sectoral certs, they fall in the gap in the middle, and we kind of negotiate about that. But really, you have to have permission of the network owner to get the data. Managed service providers can also get the data with agreement from the network owners. So if you're using, you know, somebody to look after your cybersecurity, a managed provider, managed security service, then they can get the data with your agreement. But basically, you need to have that documentation. But, you know, it can be down to, if you've got a single static IP address, like I've just registered in Kenya, where I live, you can pay a little bit extra to have a static IP, and that is you are the owner of that IP. So I can get a report just for that single IP address. And what the reports will show you is you will get a report daily showing any malicious activity, you know, any fingerprint on that IP address. It will alert you to it. So if you have a telco with a, you know, big network, we will see typically, you know, servers that are vulnerable, critically vulnerable, and so, you know, a telco can then respond and triage and go for those priority critical servers and you know, other features on that IP range. The reports themselves come in a CSV format via email. If you get up and running with email, we can then provide an API feed, but, you know, that needs a little bit more technical sort of work to be done to set up. You know, you need something to visualize and to triage that feed if you're using an API. But we're here to help. We are running a program in West Africa, sponsored by the German GIZ Development Agency, to bring in and use Intel MQ. And we're sat down with the certs there to sit and develop exactly how to use this data at that next level. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, I think that's us done. But please sign up. And if you've got any questions, andy@shadowserver.org, please do drop me a line. Be happy to hear from you. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, could we have another round of applause for Mr. Andy Chadwick from Shadow Server, who said he wasn't here to sell us anything, but I think we're sold on the idea. I'll definitely say that. Now to our second, which will now be our third, presentation on navigating cybersecurity in financial services. Mr. Andrew Bemba, I hand over to your esteemed self to take us through your presentation, which I believe will be just as short and sweet as Andy's, because you have the same name, so.
It's already afternoon. Sorry. So afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Bemba. I work with the Reserve Bank of Malawi. I'm the manager cybersecurity risk. If I were to be so clever, I would have just said, Chris, can you please just ignore my presentation? Reason why? The first presenter has almost covered everything that I prepared. But nonetheless, I'm not all that clever. I'll make some few presentation. So our presentation today is on navigating cybersecurity in financial services. The role of a financial sector CSET in responding to cybersecurity threats. Our discussion this afternoon will focus on, we'll discuss on 3 areas. This is one. Yeah, almost 4 areas. We'll have a discussion on cybersecurity threats in the financial industry. We'll have a discussion on how to deal with cybersecurity threats. We'll slightly cover on some areas on the role of financial sector, and finally we'll share some of the activities which are being done at the Reserve Bank of Malawi regarding to financial CSET. As I said earlier on, the previous presenter has already covered most of the areas that I prepared. On the cybersecurity threats in the financial industry, I'll just give an overview of cybersecurity threats in the financial industry. You and me can agree that cybersecurity threats are increasing and becoming more complex. And the financial service sector remains one of the most targeted industries for the cyber attacks. Reason, due to the wealth of financial and personal data it holds. The key cybersecurity issues that confronted the financial sector in 2024 included emerging threats, the evolving regulatory landscape, and the strategies for safeguarding sensitive information and maintaining trust in an interconnected world. And this trend, according to the experts, is expected to continue in 2025. On the evolving threat landscape affecting the financial sector, ransomware indeed remains a major threat to the financial sector. The previous presenter also touched on that one. Ransomware payments hit about $1.1 billion in 2023, a record high and twice what they were in 2022. A similar activity was observed in 2024 as the number of ransomware gangs continued to increase. The previous presenter mentioned about ransomware as a service, services which are available to those who want to just hire. In 2025, the financial services industry continued to face formidable cybersecurity challenges, spurred by the relentless evolution of technology and persistent ingenuity of cybercriminals. According to the IMF, nearly 1/5 of all incidents, all cybersecurity incidents happening across the world directly impact the sector, resulting in substantial losses, nearing to about $12 billion since 2004. This is because the financial sector has certain unique characteristics, such as high market concentration in critical services like payments or custody, and reliance on common third-party IT providers. The first presenter, I think, did much on this one, whereby the financial industry, they have almost common solution providers. For example, we might talk of maybe banking solutions. I understand the others they are using T24, others they are using FlexTube. But the providers are almost common. So it means then the threats to the industry is also common. These amplify the impact of cyber attacks. Let me give you a few examples of the incidents that happened on the local soil in Malawi. Just hold me, let me close down the presentation and show you examples.
The technical, of course, I'm technical, but now these other devices, I'm not sure. Okay, fine, thanks. Yeah, the first scenario I can say, refer to it as an incident that happened in Malawi involving the commercial banks. The first incident involved the fraudulent SWIFT transactions. I know most of you, we all know what SWIFT system is all about, but for those that are not aware of it, it's one of the solutions that is used for transferring transactions across all banks across the world. So the first incident that happened in Malawi involved SWIFT transactions. In June 2017, Bank A identified the SWIFT messages unknown to the bank that had been transmitted to foreign banks through 3 corresponding banks. Out of the 16 messages, which are of course transactions, money transactions, 6 were successfully transmitted, while 10 were unsuccessful because they do not conform to the SWIFT Alliance standards or format. Immediate analysis of the 16 transactions indicated that hackers compromised the user credentials of the SWIFT system administrator and used the compromised credentials to facilitate changing passwords for 3 users to enable successful creation, verification, and authorization of the SWIFT messages. Due to this incident, the affected bank, wow, why is this thing embarrassing me? Why is it? Hey, it wants me to stop presenting. Hey, those guys, the owners of this, can you come? No. Maybe I'm attacked. Yeah, maybe the body chair is saying the truth. What I'm trying to do is, I want to go to the next page on this one, but it just, no. So it's not only me.